Good morning. I want to call to order the quarterly commission meeting. I want to start by turning things over to council to discuss an executive session.
The record
Council
should
Mister.
reflect that the commission sat in executive session today, March 9th, just prior to the commencement of this regular quarterly meeting of the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing. The purpose of the executive session was to discuss pending personnel matters. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. And I just want to open up by welcoming all the commission members, starting with Vice Chair Krajewski. We have Representative Bonner, Judge Daly, and Attorney Marsico by Zoom. And then also present are Judge Marsico, Judge McDermott, Professor Rago. We have Senator Street, again by Zoom. And then in person, we have DA Sunday. So welcome to everybody. We have a lot to get through today, but fortunately we're starting 30 minutes late. So, but we will get through it all. So I want to start by seeking approval of the minutes of December 8th. Oh, public comment. Almost forgot it. Do we have anybody who's present for public comment? Okay. If anybody's present on Zoom, if you could please raise your hand. Okay, there's no one present in person or via Zoom. So with that, Judge Daly.
Sorry, that was an accident. Sorry.
That's okay. It's good. It's testing the system.
Yeah.
Okay. So no public comments being noted. Then I will move on to the first action item, just to ask if there's a motion for the approval of the minutes of the December 8th, 2022 quarterly business meeting.
I will so move.
Right. Second. DA Sunday. Any opposed? All right, then that's approved. And then the next step we're going to do is move on to the executive update, where I'll turn that over to the executive director.
Thank you, Judge, and good morning. As far as the commission membership, I want to know for the record that we received a reappointment letter for Senator Langerholt. As members know, the terms are for 2 years, but Senator Langerholt's reappointment had not been received, so it's an update. He will serve through October 1st, and in fact, all appointments serve through October 1st. So we'll be looking for reappointments for all members prior to October 1st of this year. So we'll send a notice to the appointing authorities. Next is the ex officio agency updates. I want to welcome our new acting DOC Secretary Harry, who joined us yesterday, and just provide you with any opportunity to make any comments or any types of comments related to the Department of Correction.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure to meet folks here the past couple of days, and just look forward to continuing the work be a part of the continuing work that you're doing, as it certainly impacts our agency and really all hard work.
Great. Thank you, Secretary. And I know we had the board secretary, the parole board secretary with us earlier today, but I don't see any board representatives here now, so we'll pass on. But I do want to just recognize for the record all of the work of the parole board as we've worked together to try to develop parole guidelines and recommitment ranges. And just a brief report that, as you know, the new parole guidelines took effect January 1st of this year. And because of the efforts of the parole board, they are working to automate the process so that any parole decisions under those new guidelines and related information will be provided to the commission. So it's a big lift, a lot of work on their part, but really happy for the cooperation and coordination between our two agencies. Moving on to staff, I think the first and very important issue on the agenda is the retirement and recognition of Kathy Dittman. Kathy's been with the commission for many, many years, and I think all of you know Kathy very well because she is the person that coordinates your travel and arrangements for meetings. and so many other things. She's done it so well for so many years. She's just she's a welcoming presence for the commission and a wonderful person. And so she has a well-deserved retirement ahead of her, but we wanted to spend a little time to recognize her today during the meeting. And so I'm going to turn it over to Judge Bernstein.
All right. So I'm going to begin by thanking you on behalf of the entire commission for your many years of service. One of the things that the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing I would like to present you with is a resolution. I have a copy of it that I will read today for us all to take an opportunity to fully appreciate what you've brought to the commission over the years, and then the original will be presented to you. So the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing resolution, whereas Catherine Dittman began her service with the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing on March 30th, 1994, and will be retiring on June 16th, 2023. And whereas Ms. Dittman initially served part-time in the data entry unit and then full-time as staff assistant and as administrative support assistant. And whereas Ms. Dittman voluntarily transferred to Penn State Law in July of 2010 due to a reduction in the commission's appropriation, but returned to the commission in November of 2011 to continue her service as receptionist and event coordinator. And whereas Ms. Dittman served as first point of contact to visitors, exhibiting a welcoming presence to commission members and to internal and external constituents. And whereas Ms. Dittman served tirelessly to publish notices, arrange hotels and meeting sites, schedule court reporters, and handle logistics for nearly 3 decades of quarterly meetings and hearings, to provide assistance and travel support for commission members and staff, and to organize 2 annual conferences of the National Association of Sentencing Commission in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh in 2000 and in Philadelphia in 2006. And whereas Ms. Dittman managed the commission database, all mailings large and small, and assisted with proofreading transcripts, compiling reports, and posting documents. Now, therefore, the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing recognizes Catherine Dittman for her kindness and collegiality and more than 26 years of excellent service, expresses sincere appreciation for her efforts, and offer her best wishes in her retirement. This was adopted March 9th, 2023. So we begin with our thanks in recognition of the resolution. I think it speaks to not only your years of service, but the amount of service that you provided during those years. So I think we'll just begin by giving you a little round of applause for everything you've brought. Additionally, I wanted, on behalf of the commission, we have a gift. It's a gorgeous wooden box with a PA State Capitol embossed on the front, and I'm sure complete sterling silver. And it's beautiful inside. I thought at first they gave me a humidor, but in fact, it is a gift for your retirement. And just a few words. I'm sure all of us have stories about Kathy and things she's done on our behalf. One of the things I wanted to note is that sometimes it just flies under the radar because we're all so accustomed to everything being taken care of. But if you think about that, that's probably best quality is you never have to ask for anything. You never have to double check to see if something's taken care of. She's always got it done. And in fact, she will double check with you to make sure you have what you need to have done on your end, and maybe sometimes triple check. So we've been blessed. I can't picture exactly what the commission will look like without her. On a personal level, Kathy and I will email back and forth with little emojis and little warm wishes. And it literally brightens my day. So just on a personal level, I appreciate those. And then finally, I just have a little short story. When you receive your resolution, you will note that my signature is in purple pen, which started a whole conversation. And somehow in the DA's office towards the end, I used a purple pen a lot. And when I took the bench, I ended up signing things with a purple pen. And now that's all they order me. And now when someone's new to the court administrator's office, when they can't read something and they say, "Is it in purple pen?" And they'll say, "Yes." They'll say, "Well, that's Judge Bernstein." So although I was handed the blue pen initially, the decision was made that I would execute it with my purple pen with a special thought to you and appreciation again on behalf of your service to me individually and on us collectively. So thank you, and I wish you well in retirement. I'm sure that your days will be full and joyful. So thank you from everybody.
Judge.
Just to chime in real quick, just thank you, Kathy, for all of your work and service for the commission. I think you are a testament to the fact that staff is often what makes these bodies run. And you have done a lot of work to make sure we as commission members have all the things we need to be able to conduct business effectively. I have sent you last minute emails too many times and more times than I would like to admit, but you've always been receptive and understanding. So just really appreciate the professionalism and any care you brought to the role. And I just want to echo Judge Bernstein. It'll be a loss without you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else before I turn the floor over to Kathy to ask if she wishes to say anything? All right. At this time, if you have any words that you want to add or state, you're very, very welcome to address the commission.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to have worked with you and with past members and staff for 26 plus years. I truly look on it as my privilege and honor to do so. And so I thank you. I want to particularly thank Mark Bergstrom for being my mentor and encourager. And he has been the most wonderful, wonderful executive director. So Mark, I thank you. I also thank you for the beautiful resolution and for the gift that I will put beside my beautiful statuette that I received on my 25th year anniversary. And so I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to work with you, to serve you, and I will miss all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'll turn it back to the executive director.
Great. Thank you, Judge. Moving on to the agenda, the next recognition is of promotion. Maria and Agela has been promoted as of January 1st of this year to a policy specialist from the education outreach specialist position she held prior to that. Maria is, I'm not sure if she's happy about the promotion because she was saddled with really helping us to prepare all the materials and especially the very tedious work on OGS assignments, those documents related to the guideline proposals. And the biggest lift that was required was trying to get some handle around organizing not only the current DUI statute, but the revisions to the DUI statute. So really, she's always been helpful, very knowledgeable, very detail oriented, and I'm so happy that she's in the position to help us at this time that we're making so many changes to the guidelines. So just wanted to mention that and congratulate Maria on her promotion. And the final issue regarding management and oversight deals with the executive director search. As council noted, the commission had an executive session this morning to discuss some of the details of this. Just a couple of things that I can report out on is the commission's continuing the job search for the executive director position. There has been discussion about increasing the potential salary or the salary range available for consideration for the executive director search, and linked to this because there's been some delay in the process. I've agreed to just delay my resignation or retirement, whatever it is that I'm doing, from June 30th to December 31st, so that I'm available for helping to get through this transition period and have and be in place to help bring on or onboard a new executive director. So we're really hopeful that will be a successful search and resolution of that issue in the near future. And then, by the end of the year, a new executive director will be in place. So those are the key issues in management and oversight. The other issue that I'd like to report out on very briefly are some of the fiscal issues, and there are some action items here. The first is Jadine has provided to all of you a copy of the most recent financial audit, the audit of the fiscal year 21-22 budget. Just as a little bit of background, many years ago, the commission had a performance audit was done by the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee. And just because of the nature of how the commission operates as a legislative agency, but also linked to Penn State and sometimes with separate grants, the recommendation at that time was that the commission should conduct or have done an independent financial audit each year. And so this is after many years of doing the same thing. This is the audit for this most recent closed year of operations. So there's two action items. One is the approval or the receipt of the audit report. And second, we, I guess 3 years ago, decided it would be more helpful to do 3-year cycles for the audit instead of doing a separate request each year. So you're going to see a request for proposals that we'd like to offer to get solicitations for a 3-year audit cycle for the next 3 years. So with that as background, the first action item is just approval of receipt of the fiscal year 21-22 audit report.
Is there a motion for the acceptance of the audit of the finance fiscal year 2021-22? Okay, Vice Chair, any second? DA Sunday? Okay. Any in opposition, please raise your hand. Any hands raised on Zoom? All right, no opposition being noted, that approves. And then that passes, and then we're going to go on to the next, which is motion for approval of request for proposals for the financial audits for fiscal year 22-23 and 24-25. Do I have a motion? That would be Judge Marsico, second. Okay, Judge McDermott. Any in opposition, please raise your hand. None being noted, the motion's approved.
Thank you, Judge. Next is moving to the current operating budget for fiscal year 22-23. The information is provided in your materials. There's one action item, and it's a request for a service purchase contract with Visual Research. As you know, we've worked with Visual Research in the past to help us develop the matrix and help us with a lot of communications and documentation. And because of the efforts moving forward to adopt the new guidelines and put in place both things related to the guidelines, like a matrix that you can read, and also helping to think through some of the graphics and some of the work related to the new SGS web application, we would like to reconnect with Visual Research to have them help us develop some of those materials so that we're up and running with the new guidelines when they come into place. So the details are provided in the packet, and I'd ask for approval of a service purchase contract with Visual Research.
Is there a motion for the approval of the service purchase contract not to exceed $25,000 in order to provide design support for the 8th edition sentencing guidelines? Professor Rago, motion second. Anyone? Okay, Judge McDermott second. Any in opposition, please raise your hand. Okay, no opposition being noted, then the motion is approved.
Thank you. And the final action item and final action of the fiscal report is related to the upcoming budget year, the budget request for fiscal year 23-24. As many of you know, the governor gave his budget address the other day, and as a legislative agency, there's generally just a continuation from the previous year in the budget request. But we work with our legislative members and with the General Assembly to request our appropriation each year. And during the December meeting, the commission approved an outline and a target dollar figure for our appropriations request. The approval was for $3 million request for our standard or our basic approach appropriation, and then a $1 million one-time request for support for the rebuilding of SGS Web. Since then, we've because of a number of the issues in play, we've tried to update what our current operating costs are and project what we would need for operating costs for next year. There's a slight increase, so we're recommending that the request be for 3.1 million instead of 3 million. And then I guess as positive news, I've been working with the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency in requesting federal funding through NCHIP funding for help in building SGS Web. At least in the federal application, PCCD has included a request for $1 million to support the rebuilding of SGS Web. There's no guarantee we'll get it, but at least in the information we provide to the General Assembly, we can at least acknowledge that we've asked for the $1 million request. It's in the application, and only if that is not provided to us do we then ask for the $1 million one-time appropriation. As we discussed in December, if we don't receive the appropriation, one of the, I guess, fallback places we could be in is that we do have some reserve funds that are intended to be there in case the budget isn't passed and so forth. So we do have some funding that we could rely on, but our hope is to sort of remain solvent. And so hopefully we get the federal funds, and if we don't, we should be requesting these funds from the General Assembly. So I've drafted a budget request memo. I've shared that with the executive committee, so with the legislative members, the chair and vice chair. And as long as this request is approved, I will then submit that later this week or next week.
Any discussion? All right. I need a motion for the approval of the actions related to the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget request. All right, Representative Krajewski, second. Judge Marsico. Anybody in opposition, please raise your hand. Anyone raising on Zoom? All right, no hands being raised, then the motion carries and is approved.
Great, thank you. And at this point, I can turn it over to Deputy Director Ryan Myers for the administrative and outreach update.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Chair. I'll be relatively brief here and move us along, but I thought I'd spend a little bit of time up front, and this is a little new for us that I'm not reporting out necessarily as the manager of education and outreach, but sort of front loading here with some of the efforts of the administration and outreach section of the commission. So I'll follow up after this with the education outreach unit. But the first thing that you'll see on the screen here is some information that I've talked about in the past. I know Mark's spoken about a lot as well, is just diversity, equity, and inclusion, and some efforts that the commission as staff are concerned are making in this area. And one of the things I had mentioned, I believe at the last commission meeting, dealt with Lincoln University and some conversations and a visit that Mark and I had back in the fall or maybe early winter of 2022. Just recently, and actually as of last night, I confirmed with the professor on campus there to visit here later in March and hold a series of guest lectures for Lincoln University's criminology and sociology department. And I guess I'm going to have to brush up on some of my old soc theories a little bit, because one of the classes is sociological theories, a little strain theory or conflict theory. I think I'll have to look at my old textbooks. But the point of all of this is to say that we continue these efforts, and this is a great step forward. And when I visit that day, I'll hopefully be able to meet with other faculty members and students in a less formal setting. But it gives us an opportunity to talk about the work of the commission, certainly talk about all of the work around the 8th edition from a policy perspective, and also extend opportunities for individuals at Lincoln University to engage with staff through internships and so forth. So we will continue to look for other efforts throughout Pennsylvania where we can expand on that. And one thing that I will mention as I wrap up the DEI portion and go into the staffing update is that we're doing the same on the staffing side as well, looking to diversify staff. And that's proven not to be the easiest thing, but we continue to do so. And that's part of as we go through these postings and vacant positions that, you know, that's part of our consideration and trying to promote diversity, equity, inclusion at the commission. So just quickly under the staffing update, Mark touched base on the executive director position, and I'll just touch base on some in the education and outreach specifically. We currently still have the manager position open, and that's something that we'll be holding a second round of interviews here soon, and hopefully finding a qualified individual for that position. And that's the result of my taking over as the deputy director. Mark had mentioned Maria Agello's promotion to policy specialist. And while happy for Maria, she just created another vacancy for us. So we'll have to fill in the education and outreach specialist position, and we do have that posted. And so, you know, if you know anybody, let me know. We're looking for that position. We have a couple vacant positions that we're holding off on right now, but a communication specialist position, and then sort of an information technology position to support the commission and staff. But we'll keep you posted on that. The next bullet that you see is the reporting and compliance efforts. This isn't the meeting to discuss that in great detail, but that's an effort that's underway and sort of it's always underway for us from a staff perspective. And the education outreach unit is working with Brett's unit and Christie's unit initially on the preliminary analysis and just discussing the details of that. But we'll be communicating with counties here in the next month or so, some of the preliminary analysis and next steps. So just stay tuned. The fourth bullet that you see on the screen talks about the Villanova sentencing workshop. And I just wanted to mention that I believe this is the 21st year that the Villanova sentencing workshop has been in place, and thanking Mark for the opportunity to participate in that. And of course, Professor Chanison at Villanova Law for guiding all of the students and the participants through. If you received the March commission monthly update in your email, we headlined the update with a Villanova sentencing workshop sort of midway through recap of session 1 that happened in February. And then session 2 will conclude later this month. And Mark and I will be going back down to Villanova for that. And it's a great opportunity for students at Villanova, but maybe more importantly, from our perspective, a great opportunity for judges and other criminal justice practitioners to engage in those discussions. And we have judge representation from all over the state: Allegheny, Philadelphia, Clarion, Westmoreland, Erie, and I'm probably missing one. I said Philadelphia, but I don't know. There's somebody else, but we have them all over, which is a great representation of the Commonwealth. And so I just wanted to mention that we're sort of midway through on those efforts. And then lastly, you'll see that in February last month, there was an article released in the Federal Sentencing Reporter in which Mark and myself collaborated on to talk about change management. And I think I won't say much more about that because you're all been living it now for a while, but really focused in on the efforts around the 8th edition over the years here to try to bring that full circle. So with that being said, I'll transition. Well, I'll pass it back to the chair for the next section. Yep.
I'm just saying that education and outreach unit.
And then
like,
so I'll put on
passing
my,
you back
and,
over that.
I just wanted
You
to
know,
be
it's-
formal
I
there.
just want to
Yeah.
say it's not bolded, so go ahead.
And then I'll put on my hat of manager and run through this really quickly for you all. So just every month preceding the commission meeting, the Education Outreach Committee meets and discusses any of the issues under the Education Outreach unit. And that's a really great opportunity for staff to connect with the commission members. So we appreciate that. The information of those meetings is in your notebook. I'm sorry, in your supplemental. The Education Outreach Unit staff have kicked off last month in February the standard seminar series, which we are hosting right now remotely, and that's been well attended in the past and continues to be well attended at the beginning of this year. We will start later this month the Commission's Legislative Lunch and Learn series, and so we'll be reporting out on the outcome of the 8th edition and these other guidelines that will be in front of the Commission, I guess, here momentarily. Also included in your supplemental materials is any legislation that's been enacted since Amendment 6. And so we just continue to track that, and that's helpful as we move into new additions or amendments to additions. So that's just reference material for you. And then I'll wrap up on just noting other education and outreach activities. As part of the standard seminar series, we are approved, the commission is approved to offer CJE credits for all of those. And if, just as a reminder, maybe for some of our newer members, well, maybe even over a year ago now, the commission was approved to be a CLE provider. And so any of our sessions that we do are available for attorneys to receive CLE credits. So that's great for us on both fronts, for CJE credits and of course CLE credits. That's a nice draw for individuals coming to the sessions. And then included in your notebook under highlights is just the totals from 2022 as far as I'll call it sort of like customer service and the work that the unit does. And I just wanted to note, not the specific numbers, but we track pretty well from year to year, and we've continued to climb a little bit in the assistance and the calls that we receive and the responses that we provide. So we stay pretty busy communicating the work of the commission and providing information on the policies that are in front of individuals every day in the courtrooms. So I think with that, I'll stop and turn it back to the chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Director. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to Senior Deputy Director for Research and Technology update, Matt Kleiman.
Great, thank you. For this brief overview, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the research partnerships that we have with Penn State University, and then the work that we have with other partners throughout the Commonwealth. So one of the great things about the Penn State partnership is that we are able to get additional resources to assist us with a lot of the work that we do. This comes in the form of postdoctoral scholars, graduate students, undergrad, interns. These individuals are able to help us and assist us with the mandates that we receive, things like the Violation of Uniform Firearm Act report, the resource utilization analysis that was shared during the policy meeting yesterday. So that there's a tremendous amount of work being done in the research and data analysis unit that Brett will talk about shortly. Having these additional resources also gives us an opportunity to explore other things that the commission may be of interest. So I'm just going to run down some lists of some activities that the graduate students and the postdoctoral fellows, and we also have 2 visiting scholars who are assisting on a number of these projects as well. We did a little work on updating or exploring what additional research related to domestic violence risk assessment has been done, especially as it relates to the Ontario Domestic Assault Risk Assessment, ODARA, that the commission was discussing a few years ago as the pretrial risk assessment tool. We've also did another quick revisiting of the utilization of the sentencing risk assessment tool that the commission developed and adopted a few years ago, how that's being used in practice. And then we have a number of ongoing studies. We're looking at specifically about specific offenses related to retail theft, possession with intent to deliver. One of our postdoctoral scholars is very interested in brain science and is going to be looking at sentencing practices for youthful offenders, not only juveniles sentenced as adults, but thinking about youthful offenders 18 to 25. That's some new work that we're starting in conjunction with faculty at Penn State University. We also completed a manuscript on the impact of COVID-19 on sentencing practices. This serves dual purposes. One, it will be part of the annual report, but also a manuscript that we prepared for submission to the American Journal of Criminal Justice. We also, working with a former postdoc and a professor at Penn State University, coming out of the academic review panel, published an article in the Journal of Research in Crime and Delinquency focused on juvenile adjudications, all that work we did related to gap and decay and lapsing policies and the impact that juvenile adjudications have on sentences here in the Commonwealth. A couple others are, we're working with a visiting scholar from Shippensburg University on a study of county-specific practices here in the Commonwealth, how to collect information that typically is not collected in the Commonwealth and widely shared about programs that are available in the counties, but with a real eye towards being able to do evaluations that allow us to assess the costs and benefits of specific programs, to be looking for best practices and scaling up across the Commonwealth of what works. couple more, and I know it's a giant laundry list, but we're focused a little bit on using our resentencing data to be looking at resentencing practices. We also want to leverage some information and data we receive from the AOPC to look at the impact of bail decisions on future decisions that are made, especially as it relates to sentencing practice. Okay, and then two things about the partnership, and then I'll go to the external folks. So we're fortunate to welcome a new intern this semester. Ali Staraka is both an undergrad and a graduate student, which is a weird arrangement at Penn State. But she is in the Department of Criminology and also in the School of International Affairs, and she joins us. So we're really excited to have her on board with the commission. And then we're also happy to support a Masters of Public Policy student on their capstone project. This individual was a summer intern with us for 300 hours during the summer, where she did a lot of work, and her capstone is going to be focusing on individuals in the Commonwealth who are sentenced to 20 or more years, and looking at a number of factors related to that. So we're glad to continue that relationship with the Masters of Public Policy program at Penn State. And then I'd just like to highlight two other external to Penn State. We have a long history of working with lots of different universities on lots of different practices and colleges, not just universities, throughout the Commonwealth. And right now we're engaged in two specific projects. One is a continuation, again, of a long-term relation with Carnegie Mellon University, with their systems synthesis master's program. And this group is looking at the 8th edition guidelines and specifically at prior record score and how it relates to recidivism. And they're going to be presenting to us, in fact, next week on some preliminary findings. And then longer term, we're hoping to see additional advice on if there's other ways that may make sense to reorganize or redesign prior record score. So taking a look specifically at the proposals that were provided in the last 2 days from a very deep analytical data perspective on that issue. Secondly, continue to partner with Professor Steve Chanenson at Villanova University Charles Widger School of Law and a second-year law student looking at admissions practices related to drug courts. So that's an ongoing study where we hope to work with a couple different jurisdictions in the Commonwealth and get an overview of why some people are getting into drug court and why other people may not be being admitted. What are the barriers to entry and so forth. So, and then I'll end on one thing that's not on this agenda, and I serve as the vice president of a group called the National Association of Sentencing Commissions. This National Association of Sentencing Commission, also just referred to as NASC, is about to celebrate their 30th anniversary. And it was founded at a meeting that took place in Colorado in 1993. And I'll just read the mission. It's an organization created to facilitate the exchange and sharing of information, ideas, data, expertise and experiences, and to educate on issues related to sentencing policies, guidelines, and commissions. So it's been a great pleasure for me to serve on the board, to meet folks from other states, to hear about what's going on in North Carolina and Minnesota and other states, to bring that to bear on our work here in Pennsylvania. But I would like to just take a moment to promote an upcoming conference that will be taking place August 7th through 9th of this year. Historically, commission members have attended different conferences, and we would welcome the opportunity to invite you to attend the meeting. It's going to be hosted by the Nevada Department of Sentencing Policy, essentially the Nevada Sentencing Commission, in the Lake Tahoe, Nevada side of Lake Tahoe, August 7th through 9th. And last year, we had the honor of being joined by Representative Krajewski at the NASC conference. And in comments he's made, I know that he got a lot out of that. And this conference also has judges attend, legislative members, policymakers, practitioners, a whole host, not just sentencing commission staff, with a diverse range of panels.
And if I could just add to this, because our commission has been actively involved since the start. and, you know, we're one of the larger commissions. So we certainly contribute a lot to it. But as Matt said, we receive a lot from it, and members in the past that have attended conferences, I think, come back with a lot of information, and the rep can talk about this. But you know, you meet your colleagues, you know, there's not a lot of sentencing commissions around, but you get to meet with your counterparts in other jurisdictions that may just be approaching things totally differently. But it's a good opportunity to talk as commission members or discuss things, and also to think about, well, how do you use staff, or what does the commission do, or are there projects and so forth. So that's always really helpful. But there's also a lot of content. I mean, the information being provided is incredibly helpful, especially in areas that we have not focused on in the past, or just we're not, you know, the leaders in that. And I think about things like, we talked to the General Assembly. We've seen legislation about racial impact statements and things like that. We don't do that. There are some limitations to how we could do that, but there are other states that do that, and they do it really well. And so Matt was talking about some of the research we're doing to improve the quality of our data so that we would be prepared to do something like that. You know, we heard yesterday during the public hearings about the guidelines about the importance of racial impact in addition to just resource utilization. So I think all those are important, and NASC is like this great opportunity one time a year to visit and learn. And it's not terrible that it's in a really nice location this year. So last year it was in Portland, Oregon. You know, sometimes it's not in such great places, but it's been great lately. And as the judge mentioned in the resolution for Kathy, our commission hosted it twice, 2000 and 2000 something. And so in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia. So, you know, they can always come back. We could do it here. We could do it in State College. We could, you know, whatever. So I just wanted to encourage commission members to give some thought to attending, because I think it's really helpful. And we encourage staff to attend because they get a lot out of it too. So we always build it into the budget and into staff development. Thanks, Matt.
So if you're vice president, are you in line for president next, or is that how it works?
Maybe.
Okay. Curious.
Oh, go ahead. Please.
Oh, just to chime in and say, you know, and I'll say in the front, I do love a good conference. But I just want to echo everything. You know, it was very informative. I thought it was helpful to understand the different priorities and issues that commissions across the country prioritize and work on, and how that, you know, compares, contrasts with Pennsylvania. So I thought it was great for just getting an understanding of the landscape, and and seeing, you know, what are things that we're doing here that would be helpful elsewhere, and vice versa. And even ideas that I was able to take as a legislator that were outside of the commission. I was like, oh, like they're doing this would be a good policy thing to work on. So just generally overall, a very informative experience. If I can make it, I will go again. And I would definitely urge other members to go as well.
Can I ask a question? If the agenda is available, could it be sent out to us so we could take a look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now they're trying to develop the conference theme, and then we'll be making requests for panels, and we'll share that for certain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, the commission underwrites the cost of travel and all of that kind of stuff for the conference. One other thing, Ryan mentioned an article that we published, and I think all of us have published articles over the years in the Federal Sentencing Reporter, which is a sort of a publication that deals with a lot of the issues we deal with. It's used a lot by law schools and people sort of practitioners in this field. And there is I think a strong connection over time between participants in NASC conferences and engagement and that kind of stuff, and some of these publications in the Federal Sentencing Reporter, FSR, which is just a nice way to try to document some of the things that come out of the conferences, or some of the work in the sentencing world generally, and around sentencing commissions. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'll just add one last comment, because Mark mentioned something that I omitted, and we are working with some of the postdocs and folks to develop a methodology to overcome some missing data that we have related to race and ethnicity. And in fact, we're preparing a manuscript to share with the commission, but also to submit to the federal sentencing reporter on this topic. And I think this will go a long way helping overcome some of the missing data that in AOPC, as well as the commission's sentencing data that we're missing ethnicity designations. So thank you.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Any questions or comments? Okay, then I think I'm ready. We'll turn it over to the Application and Information Technology Unit, Christy Bundro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also attended the NAS conference last year, and there was talk of having it in Hawaii next year. So before we offer up State College, let's see how that plays out. In the interest of time, I'm going to primarily focus on the project to rebuild the SGS web application. As you'll recall, in the December commission meeting, JMT Technology Group joined us to present the blueprint that they had designed for the future state of the SGS web application. The blueprint provides the framework and the foundation to start rebuilding the application. Also in December, with the approval of the commission, we published an RFP to find a vendor to partner on the implementation effort. The project described in the RFP covers the first phase of the rebuild, which focuses on the core function of the new application needed to implement the 8th edition guidelines, as well as other improvements that are needed, such as automating the prior record score and making the application more offender-centric. We do envision future phases that were not included in the RFP to enhance the functionality and add modules at a later date. Just an update on the RFP process. We received 13 proposals from vendors. Commission staff reviewed all the proposals and selected a subset for an external RFP review committee to evaluate and score. That committee was composed of staff from AOPC, PSDC, and JNet. The top 2 vendors were then invited to present their proposals to the commission's executive team and unit managers. We were hoping to have made a decision on the vendor to share today, but we're still in the process of checking references for the finalists. So instead, as an action item, Madam Chair, we're asking the commission to delegate authority to the commission chair and vice chair to approve a service purchase contract with the vendor recommended by staff, not to exceed $1 million for the development of the first phase of the next gen application.
Okay. So this is lengthy. I'm asking for a motion for the delegation of authority. Well, first, I guess we should have a conversation about it. The request is basically to give the authority, delegate it to for me and to the vice chair for the approval of the service purchase contract. So any discussion?
I don't need discussion. I'll make a motion unless someone else does. Basically, you're gonna be our representatives and make a decision.
Sure. And
Because it couldn't happen today, correct?
and I'm going to just make sure for record purposes, as they would say, the motion would be for the delegation of authority to the commission chair and vice chair to approve a service purchase contract with the vendor recommended by staff not to exceed $1 million for the development and implementation of phase 1 of the SGS Web Next Gen application, not currently named.
So moved.
All right. So Judge McDermott, seconded by Judge Marsico, and anybody in opposition, please raise your hand. None noted and none on Zoom. None being noted, then the motion carries and is approved. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you for the approval. Something else I wanted to note about the rebuild project. So as we've gone through the RFP process, we've been considering the timeline for the adoption of the new guidelines, as well as the implementation of the next gen application and what's feasible, since we'll have to train both practitioners and SGS web users on both the new guidelines and the new application in a potentially short time frame. So as an alternative approach, staff have been considering implementing kind of the minimal functionality required to support the 8th edition and the existing legacy SGS web application. So this approach would allow the staff to train practitioners and SGS web users on the new 8th edition guidelines on an application that they're already familiar with. The other benefit of this approach is that when we are ready to go live with the new application, we can pilot it in a small number of counties before rolling it out statewide, which we believe will facilitate a smoother transition to the new application by helping to mitigate any unforeseen issues. So as a side effect, though, in order to complete the work on the legacy application, we're going to delay starting the development of the new application until July 1st, which will shift the overall timeline for the project. However, we believe by delaying the project, it'll give staff more time to compile and document business rules, which are essential for the rebuild project. So lastly, while we've been focused kind of on the rebuild project, we do continue to support and maintain the legacy application. I won't go into the details, but in the meeting notebook, starting on page 31, there's a list of all the recent updates that we've made to SGS Web. And then I'll give a quick update on the usage of SGS Web. So at the end of December, 107,000 sentences had been submitted in SGS Web with 2022 dates of sentence. And that report you can find in the supplemental materials on page 167. So that's all I have for today. Unless there are any questions, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, then we'll move on to the research and data and analysis unit with Brett Miller to present, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to start by congratulating Kathy Dittman again on her retirement. Kathy, if you're still on the line, it's been great working with you for the last 6 years, and I wish you all the best in retirement. I'll try to make this brief because I know we're running up on the clock here. And I think Matt mentioned most of our research projects already, so I'll just sort of skip ahead and summarize the unit's work by saying that we continue to work on all of our typical annual reports, including the annual report, reporting and compliance, and yep. And we continue to work on sentencing trends and forecasting. And over the last 3 months, we've completed over 20 plus data set requests and data reports from external requesters. So with that said, like I said, I'll move past research projects listed on the slide, and we'll go into a short update on the short sentence parole evaluation. Ryan, if you could skip ahead to. You can go ahead one more slide. So the commission has been mandated to conduct an evaluation of the short sentence parole program. Short sentence parole is a program that's operated by the Department of Corrections and was established with JRI 2 legislation in 2019. The program was implemented in early 2020 and has been in operation for the past 3+ years. Under the commission's enabling legislation, we have a mandate to conduct evaluations of corrections programs like short sentence parole. And our evaluations must include eligibility and admission requirements, cost benefit analyses, and recidivism analyses. Ryan, you can go ahead to the next slide. So for the short sentence parole program eligibility, the requirements are pretty similar to the other 3 JRI 2 programs, in that the primary requirement is based on the length of sentence. So the maximum aggregate minimum sentence length is 2 years or less to be eligible for the program. And in addition, there's a few specific offense types that will exclude inmates from participation. Those would include crimes of violence, personal injury crimes, firearms offenses, sexual offenses, and drug trafficking. Additionally, any pending criminal charges or current state sentences would exclude an inmate from participation. And then finally, the parole board ultimately has discretion to exclude inmates from the program based on identifiable threats to the public risk or offender rehabilitation needs. We'll take just a minute here to sort of explain the difference between how short sentence parole operates versus the typical parole process. So again, for these inmates, these are relatively short sentences, with the median sentence for short sentence parole participants being 12 to 36 months. So under the current standard parole process, that means that that inmate would be eligible for their first parole interview at the minimum date of 12 months. And we know from prior research that the typical parole grant rate is anywhere from 55 to 60%. So approximately half of those inmates would have been released on their minimum date. But if they would have been rejected for parole, they would then have to wait an additional year for a second parole interview, and then potentially another additional year before they would finally be released on their maximum date. Under the short sentence parole program, as long as inmates meet all eligibility requirements and have no serious misconducts, they would receive presumptive release on their minimum date. No parole interview is required, saving time and administrative cost for the parole board, and allowing those inmates to return to the community, in some cases, up to 1 to 2 years earlier than they would have under standard parole processes. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the program kicked off in 2020, which sort of confuses some of the data in terms of enrollment. As we know, the COVID pandemic had a major impact on the courts as well as admissions to DOC. So I've included DOC new court admissions for each year going back to 2018. So if you look at 2018 and 2019, you can sort of get an idea of what the standard baseline rate is for new court admissions to DOC. And obviously in 2020, up to present, those rates are much lower. So it's possible that those numbers are also skewing entry into programs like short sentence parole, state drug treatment program, other similar programs. So looking in 2020, approximately 10% of new court admissions to DOC receive enrollment into the short sentence parole program. Next slide. And just looking at sort of the demographics of where these participants are coming from. Next slide, Mark. So first looking at, if you look on the right-hand column, this shows you looking at county classes where the new DOC court admits are coming from in terms of their counties within the state of Pennsylvania. So the county classes are arranged by population. So the first class would be Philadelphia County, down to the 5th through 8th classes, which would be the more rural counties. So if you look at new DOC admissions, you'll see that the rate of admissions from each of these county classes lines up pretty closely with the population of each group. So the highest population comes from the 3rd class counties, which is a group of 15 to 20 counties of relatively large population. Now, one more slide. Now, if you look at the right-hand column, which is all DOC admissions, and then compare that to the left-hand column, we're now looking at the proportion of inmates that participate in short sentence parole that come from the 4th through the 8th classes. So looking at the 4th class, for example, 12% of all new DOC admissions come from the 4th class, while the short sentence parole participants, the percentage is 20% that comes from the 4th class. So the more rural counties, 4 through 8, are more highly represented in short sentence parole than they are in the rest of the DOC population. And now looking as a comparison to the 1st and 2nd class counties, we see that while they make up roughly 15% of the DOC population combined, the two counties together only make up less than 4% of short sentence parole participants. So you can see there's a bit of a shift in where these short sentence parole participants are coming from throughout the state. And looking at the demographics, one more slide. So if we start by looking at gender, we can see that the DOC population is very heavily male, with 90% of the DOC population being male. Looking at short sentence parole, we see that it's still heavily male, but the percentage is down to 76%, which means that the female population has a much higher representation in the short sentence parole program. And looking at the racial breakdown, we see that for Black inmates, they make up 36% of the DOC population, but only 20% of short sentence parole participants. Likewise, for white inmates, they make up 60% of the DOC population, but they are actually more prevalent in the short sentence parole program at 76%. And then finally, looking at age, we see that there's a bit of a skew from the normal DOC population towards somewhat older inmates. But if you look at the 18 to 24 group, they make up 17% of the DOC population, but only 7% of the short sentence parole population. And then 35 plus, you see that there's a much higher rate of short sentence parole participation. And one of the things about the short sentence parole being related to the certain length of sentence is that it sort of tends to lead to very specific offenses that end up being eligible for those sentences. But looking at the 1,700 participants since 2020, we find that almost a third of them received a lead offense of PWID, which for the sentence leading to their DOC incarceration. Another 20% were in DOC for driving under the influence, and 18% for retail theft or other theft. Another interesting thing we noted during implementation and startup of the program was that many of the participants with eligible sentences had already been in DOC for 1 to 2 years. So it sort of gave us an interesting opportunity to look at those participants in the time period before they were in short sentence parole, and then look at the period they were in, determine if there were any differences between those two periods. But looking at this, this chart shows the number of days until enrollment into short sentence parole. So it's looking at the time period from DOC admission to enrollment in the program. So for most inmates, it's as you would expect. As they come into DOC, they're pretty quickly entered into the program and then serve out the remainder of their sentence. However, because the startup period, we did have about 20% of the inmate population that didn't get into the program until they were 1 to 2 months or sometimes 6+ months into their DOC stay. Next slide. So as I said, that sort of gave us an opportunity to see if there was any difference in DOC behavior from being in the program versus not in the program. So first, let me sort of explain these different groupings. So the bigger bar on the bottom is the overall DOC population. And what we're showing there is that for those inmates who were admitted from 2018 forward, 36% of those were found guilty of a misconduct. Then the top three groupings are the pre-SSP, in or post-SSP. So the pre-short sentence parole would be those inmates that I just mentioned who had already been serving a sentence before the program was implemented and then got added in towards the end of their sentence. So some of these individuals would have had 6 months all the way up to as much as 2 years being in DOC before they were entered into the program. But looking at those individuals, you see that about 15% of those were found guilty of any misconduct during the time before they got into the program. now looking at the next group in SSP, so this would be during their active participation in the program. So for most inmates, this is the longest time period. It's from DOC admission to up to their minimum sentence date. So even though it's the longest time period, you see only 1% of those inmates were found guilty of any misconducts. And then the post-short sentence parole would be those same individuals who were either expelled from the program or were released on parole and came back on a violation. So they had some stint in DOC after participation in the program. And you see for those individuals, their misconduct rate jumps back up again, up to 3%. But just sort of looking at these trends, it does appear that there's a motivational factor involved with inmates being involved in the short sentence parole program. And then on the bottom, you'll see the serious misconducts. So these are the misconducts that would lead to a participant being expelled from the program. And you see a similar trend there with very few misconducts during participation in the program, with a bit of a spike after the program. And so the first phase of our evaluation is focused mostly on admissions, eligibility, and as we just talked about, behavior during incarceration. The next phases will include a recidivism analysis, a cost-benefit analysis, and then any recommendations that we might have for the Department of Corrections. So with that, any questions on short sentence parole? Otherwise, we do have a couple action items that we can move on to.
We have a couple of questions. We'll start with Judge Marsico.
How do you have misconduct after the program? Aren't you released?
So for some individuals, it's because they're expelled from the program. So they stay in DOC, but are no longer in the program.
Okay.
And then for some, they might have successfully completed the program, but then came back on a parole violation under the same sentence.
Thanks.
Just looking at the slide where you had some of the demographic data, it seemed like there was some mismatches around age and race compared to the general population. Do you have any preliminary thoughts about recommendations that could be done to have have the admittance rate be more in line with the overall demographics?
So speaking specifically about age, I think one aspect to consider also is that many of these inmates are eligible for not just short sentence parole, but also state drug treatment program, triple RI, or boot camp. Many of those programs, especially boot camp, are targeted more towards the younger demographic, but I think that's part of it.
If I could throw in a couple of other things that impacted, and we'd have to analyze it more closely, but one of the things is keeping in mind that the target of this are those short sentences. So there's going to be just a different distribution of who's getting those sentences based on what are the offenses and where do they come from, because there's those kind of differences. And I think Brett had that included in, those differences by class of county, and then particularly by type of offense. The three offenses listed were, PWID, because there's a ton of drug offenses that go to the DOC. I mean, just in general numbers, when we think about sentences reported to the commission, about 20% are DUI, about 20% are drugs, and then there's, lots of other stuff. But when you look at DOC, that population looks different about who's committed to DOC. So you'd expect drug trafficking to go there. And so that's why that's a pool. The DUI is driven, keep in mind what the statute is. You have a mandatory minimum sentence that could be relatively short for a DOC sentence. And then if the person's drug dependent, you impose the statutory max. So you could have a 7-year max or a 10-year max, certainly a 5-year max, because the person's drug dependent. So you just force the person into this category because it's a short sentence going to the DOC. So DUI makes a lot of sense that they end up there. And then the third category, retail theft, is just like sort of bizarre, because you would not think a lot of those would go to DOC in the first place. But, you know, because of the nature of the offense, you could see it being a shorter sentence. It's just what's surprising is the volume going to DOC, because we certainly do try to keep those as county sentences. But, you know, retail theft has that recidivist provision that you just have chronic people coming through and it builds up. But so the retail theft thing is, I guess, not totally surprising, but the numbers being in the top 3 is a little like, yeah, okay. So thank you.
Any other comments? And I think maybe you had already said this. I know you talked about, but the state also, from what you said last night, they will take priority over if you qualify for short sentence parole, but you also qualify for one of the other programs. They're going to put you in one of the other programs first. So this is sort of the default.
We have had some discussions with the administrators at the Department of Corrections, and they did mention to us that if someone's recommended for state drug treatment program, that tends to take priority. And so they will admit as many of those as they can to that program first, and then sort of move down the hierarchy to the other programs.
Thank you. Any other comments or statements regarding the presentation? And then I think you had some action items and anything else you want to present?
No, we have 2 contracted data requests. So again, we have our standard data sets that can be requested by the public, but we also have our contracted data sets, which include things like offender SIDs and judge text reasons for departure from the guidelines. So we've received 2 requests for contracted data sets. The first is from a group of Penn State professors who are requesting data in order to study the use of algorithms in support of decision-making in the judicial system and to analyze societal impacts. So these professors are requesting contracted data from 2001 through 2021, which would be upon the release of the 2020 and 2021 data sets. And I'll go ahead and read the second request also, and then maybe we can get action on each. The second data set request comes from the Lehigh Valley Justice Institute and Victoria Wrigley. She's requesting contracted data from 2017 through 2021 in order to examine and investigate potential disparities in sentencing outcomes and deviations regarding pretrial detention, representation type, and other case factors.
Any discussion about the requested approvals on the action items?
I would like to discuss, since I'm fairly new, I assume we release to academic institutions on a regular basis.
We do, Judge. We, in fact, it's sort of like a partnership that we have these data sets available. If someone can use the data without any kind of restricted information, like without SIDs or without reasons for sentences, we have publicly available data sets, and they're regularly obtained by counties and government units and academics and many others, and by the media. And then if there's an interest for the purpose of research to match with other data and so forth, then they would have to submit, as they did here, a specific request for these contracted release data sets, where we have a contract that limits their use of it, and they report to us on the findings of the report and things like that. So there's sort of an agreement regarding us providing them with the data and what they provide back to us.
And what about, because I'm unfamiliar with the Lehigh Valley Justice Institute, I'm looking it up now. I mean, how do we do screening? Do we just automatically give?
We do not. Our enabling legislation includes that we collect, analyze, and disseminate information. So we're a clearinghouse for information, and so our job is to make sure that we're making sure it's accurate and clean, and that we're not giving away confidential information, things like that. But we want to promote transparency and we want to encourage people to, sort of work on their own. And people come to the table with a lot of different reasons. It might be, a public policy group that has an issue about something. It might be faculty doing stuff. It may be just interested in judges' sentences. So it can be all over the map, and the commission tries to stay out of the business of, selecting or judging, as long as we just sort of apply the rules.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. So we'll start off, and I'm going to just read these names with authority. I assume I pronounced them correctly. The first motion would be for the approval of contracted release data set Tawa L. Jaber and Ian Ho from PSU Smeal College of Business and Yifan Zhang of Kennesaw State University. Is there a motion for approval? Okay, so DA Sunday and seconded by Judge Marsico. Anyone in opposition, please raise your hand. None noted via Zoom or in person, so the motion is carries and is approved. And the second motion is for the approval of contracted release data set to Victoria Wrigley of Lehigh Valley Justice Institute. Any discussion? Any motion?
I'll move.
All right. All right, Judge McDermott, and then seconded by Vice Chair. Anyone in opposition, please raise your hand. None being noted by Zoom or in person, then the motion will carry and is approved. Thank you.
I think that concludes Brett's report. I did want to mention Brett referenced the 2020, 2021 data sets when completed. And as we discussed before, we've delayed, or I've contributed to delaying the 2021 annual report. We were doing a combined report, and the purpose was to create a report that discusses the whole COVID years and the impact of that. So, those 2 years just look different than other years. And so we want to present it in such a way that they're sort of in context, and we talk about the COVID impact on sentencing. So I think we have all the parts together right now for both the data and the report. So we just have to get it across the line. So I think if we approve guidelines, we'll be ready to work on an annual report. We hope to have that out. I'd hope in the next several months, maybe by the June commission meeting. And then upon the release of that, we'd have the data available for these contracted releases. Thanks.
Thank you. And then, according to my agenda, the next issue is to take it back for the policy update with the executive director.
It is. And so we've spent a lot of time over, since 2014, I guess, on working on the revisions to the sentencing guidelines. And I think we're at a point, following a review this morning, of moving towards adoption of these guidelines. I know the one open issue from the policy meeting was a discussion of the OGS assignments for several of the felony 3 offenses. And perhaps I know DA Sunday was sort of taking the lead on the discussions of that. And so if we could address any kind of changes that staff should incorporate into the proposal, and then we'll ask for a vote on adoption.
Okay, just very briefly, and please correct me if I'm wrong from any of my colleagues up here. But to start with, and this is quick. So with regard to stalking, under 2709.1A1, one of the F3s for repeated acts to cause fear of bodily injury, second subsequent offense, is currently OGS of 9, and we've agreed to move that up to OGS 10. With regard to stalking under A2, which is course of conduct to cause fear of bodily injury, second subsequent offense, that also will be moved from an OGS 9 to an OGS 10. And then under endangering the welfare of children, under 4304A1, Those are currently listed as OGS 9. And we've agreed to move those to OGS 10. And if I misstated anything, I apologize.
No, and for the record, Judge Marsico, myself, and the DA had a chance to speak, but for those who weren't in when we had a break, and that's the agreement that we thought was reasonable. What we wanted to do was to look at these in detail, and a lot of the ones, just for the record, that there was concern about were already 10s. And then looking at the ones that we were agreeing to, their specific reasons, it's the substantial risk of death or the course of conduct. And I mean, I am comfortable with that. The record is clear that we're not going up to 11, but we're going to, we, at least the three of us were in agreement for the 10. So I just didn't want anyone to feel excluded. It was a brief conversation during the break. So we have the sheet here if anyone wants to look more closely at it. Or actually, I think it was passed out at the break.
So we all have the sheet, and just for background, if anybody happens to link onto this particular recording and think that something was decided in 5 minutes in a break, this has been discussed, and then we discussed it yesterday. There was public comment on it. We discussed it during our policy meeting yesterday. We discussed it again in our policy meeting today. We discussed specific crimes and subsections of crimes. We discussed where they are presently proposed. We discussed bumping them up to 11 OGS, and then discussed the 10 and the pros and cons. So all of that was done. And then the work that was done in the break between the two was to look at some specific offenses, which we all have copies of, and then just in fact, it's just 2 offenses, but a couple of subsections out of the entire list that we were given, where there's a proposition or a proposal, I should say, to increase those particular offenses from an OGS of a 10, or excuse me, a 9 to a 10. So it sounds like for those individuals who were debating between 10 and 11, there was sort of a consensus which was addressed to us now. So I think the question is open to discussion if anybody either wants to make requests for other changes or is not in agreement for the proposed bump to the OGS of 10. So I'll open the floor. Representative?
Just a quick clarifying question. So it's 3 different charges? How many is it?
It's 2 different charges: stalking and endangering the welfare of a child. And within those 2 charges, there's 2 different subsections in each of them.
Okay.
And I think the chair put it very well in terms of the discussions over the last day or so.
Mark, you've been working on this since 2014. We just want to keep it going.
Yeah, thank you. I'm with you. So thank you. So there's we have these changes that we'll incorporate into what we discussed this morning. The one change discussed this morning from the handout that we had of the draft publication version was reducing the lapsing time for the other misdemeanors, the POG 1, from 15 years to 10 years, consistent with the clean slate time frame. So with all of those, that is the recommendation based on all that we did, that the commission approve the adopt the 8th edition sentencing guidelines as drafted, and with an effective date of January 1st, 2024.
The effective date again?
The effective date, January 1st, 2024, for offenses committed on or after that date.
Okay. All right. So the first thing that I want to do is, this will be so fast, but I don't know how you take 9+ years and wrap them up in a quick comment, but I think the fact that it's been 9+ years, just to watch the process from the opportunity I've been allowed to be involved, or been honored to be involved with it, to watch the outreach, to watch the thoughtful input of others and the receptivity of that by the commission, and then the alterations, and just watch it narrow and narrow with the last public hearings, really hearing people saying, thank you for hearing what we've said. This is a good product. This is going to effectuate positive change, down to the very last. I can think of a funnel in the last little bit that we just worked through this morning. It has been quite a process. I cannot commend the staff enough, the executive director enough, and to all of those who have served on the commission during this process and continue to serve. It's just a testament, honestly. And this is something really that's going to alter and improve the sentencing processes and the criminal system throughout Pennsylvania in very positive ways. So it is the first thing I'm going to do is open up to the floor for any discussion prior to the making of a motion. Is there any further discussion about the 8th edition sentencing guidelines being adopted and or the effective date? Any noted on Zoom? None noted. So then it is with much delight that I request a motion for the adoption of the 8th edition sentencing guidelines effective date of January 1st, 2024 for all offenses committed on or after that date. All in favor, because I think this is very important. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Do we have a motion?
Oh, I thought we
I-
did.
I most, can the chair make the motion since?
I'm
you've been
going
here?
to defer it. I will defer to the commission.
Okay, I
sir.
was going to give you, I mean,
I
as a
appreciate
newer
that.
person, I didn't think I should do it because I haven't done most of the work. But if no one else wants to do it, I'm happy to make the motion.
It sounds like a motion to me. There's been a motion by Justice
Oh, you can make-
McDermott.
Justice. Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Judge. The Honorable. There's been a motion from Barb. Okay. Any second? Seconded by Judge Marsico. And all in favor, say aye. Showing of
Aye.
hands. Favor on Zoom.
Yeah, Attorney Marsico's on Zoom raising his hand.
Okay. Any others?
Representative Bonner.
Okay.
I think we're, any opposed, that's the question,
I'm
I
going
guess,
there.
right?
Any opposition, say nay and raise your hand. None being noted in person. Any opposition through the Zoom?
I don't believe so.
All right, motion carries and approved.
Great. And for that, the staff will prepare the final version to submit to the Pennsylvania Bulletin. But we'll share that with commission staff. If there's any issues that come up, we'll bring it back to the June meeting, but we anticipate we'll submit. It will have a 90-day review period by the General Assembly. If not rejected by a concurrent resolution, they take effect. And as noted, they'll take effect January 1st for offenses committed on after that date. So the next is the adoption of the resentencing guidelines. There were no comments received. The only change that we will be making to what we've published in the past is by inserting the definition of administrative probation in the definitions section. Otherwise, everything remains the same.
And will that be the same effective date?
Effective, well,
Or
the resentencing guidelines are written to apply to each underlying set of guidelines. So for the 8th edition resentencing guidelines, they will apply January 1st, 2024 for offenses committed on or after that date.
Okay. Any discussion prior to a motion? All right, then I'm going to make Rod requesting a motion for the adoption of the resentencing guidelines. All right, the vice chair. Second.
I'll second.
Okay. And Judge with the second. Anybody in opposition, please raise your hand. None being noted via Zoom, none being noted in person. Then the motion carries and the adoption is approved. Okay.
And the final action item is adoption of the state parole recommitment ranges. As discussed during the policy meeting, there were minor changes to table 1, and staff will review to make sure any related changes in the text of the guidelines occur. But the staff is recommending adoption of these initial state parole guidelines, state parole recommitment ranges to take effect for recommitment decisions considered on or after January 1st, 2024.
All right, any discussion? Is there a motion for the approval of the adoption of the state parole recommitment ranges? All right, Professor Rager. Second. BA Sunday. Any opposition? If so, please raise your hand. None on Zoom, none in person. Motion carries and is approved.
Nice. Okay, so so first, thank you all very much for that. I think that concludes the policy update. We have no work to do anymore, and I'll turn it back to the chair for any closing comments and the miscellaneous items.
All right. So for the next meeting is June. Yeah, I don't have it.
Yes, it
It
is.
is in June. and it
It's
is
in
here.
June.
I think I have it in
Thank you.
June 7th and
June
8th. That'll be
7th and
here in Harrisburg.
Mhm.
And then, is there anything else we need to discuss regarding the calendar at this time?
No, but Matt will send out information about the NAS conference as soon as it's available. If we receive any information just on things like registration or hotel stuff, we'll get that to you. And if you're interested, please let us know as soon as possible so that we can start making plans. What we generally try to do is cut a single check, just sort of have a registration and hotel registrations done on behalf of the entire commission. So it's just easier to process. What generally has happened in the past is that we ask you to make your own travel arrangements, and then the commission will reimburse you for that. Please don't go first class, but we'll reimburse mileage if you want to drive out. But anyhow, so thank you.
And then the last question, or I guess favor I would ask is if the executive director, Mark, if you could maybe send out an email letting people know if they know somebody who's interested in the position, what they would need to do to apply. And if you have any suggestions about the process that you want to reach out to any of the commission members, please send something out to all of us. And then the vice chair and I will get to work, hopefully bringing a viable candidate for June. So with that, is there any other discussion before the meeting is adjourned? All right. It's 1:03 p.m. and the meeting is
I
adjourned.
said by